Welcome to the Soul Archaeology podcast, a space for connection, resonance, witnessing, and learning. Together we'll harvest medicine from the spiral of life, sharing conversations with other embodied humans who have navigated their own initiations and found alignment with their true soul essence. With weekly astrology, energy updates, embodied conversation, and channeled teachings, this is a space for you to land and find resonance with the spiral of your own soul. Hello there, and welcome back to the Soul Archaeology podcast. It's so nice to be on the other side of Mercury retrograde. I'm sure many of you feel that way as well, although we're still in the shadow. Mercury went direct on last Friday on the 15th of September, and we're slowly moving through its shadow as it moves through Virgo back to where it began its retrograde journey. So Venus is still in her shadow as well as she moves through Leo, and we're really collecting many parts, lots of information that we have, that we're holding, that we've uncovered. We're integrating them into our lives. We're starting to see where they are held, where they show up, where they surface. And we're in many ways sort of in this liminal space. So I wanted to do an energy update today and really just kind of get into the inner workings of this current climate and why we're receiving these messages, this information, these upgrades, why we're in this particular space and how we can work with it. I find it so beneficial for myself and for my clients as well that to really just understand the astrological climate, the energy climate, whatever we want to call it, so we can help ourselves orient in this time and space to find an anchor point, to understand maybe not even why the energy is showing up in this particular way, but to give some perspective, to create a little bit of a reorientation, to find our rooting, find our grounding, and find the medicine that can be held in these times and spaces. This week, I really see a theme around the sun. We have some aspects between Pluto and Neptune to the sun that are creating openings, awakenings, I believe. When the sun interacts with another planet, it illuminates and it reveals. It shines a light on whatever that particular planet is working on in that particular sign. And so, of course, I've talked a lot about Pluto and Capricorn and what it's been teaching us for the last 15 years and the fact that we're officially moving out of it in January of 2024. So there will be a lot particularly coming up around unveiling money patterns, patterns around your sense of power, self-worth, work, anything related to Capricorn in your life, where it lands in your chart can certainly receive a bit of a revealing, or perhaps if you've been feeling that you've been moving through the underworld in that area of your life, you will perhaps receive some awakenings around that. And with the sun opposing Neptune in Pisces, there will certainly be some focus on this concept or this idea of control and how it shows up in our lives. I've been talking to so many of my clients about this because control has been a huge theme that's been coming up over this Virgo season. The sneaky ways in which control sort of infiltrates our lives and adds resistance and friction and tension in areas where we're really seeking surrendering and release. And so Neptune in Pisces is sort of revealing to us where we perhaps have illusion in our lives, where we're living in a sense of illusion. And with it being along the Virgo-Pisces axis, it's a lot about surrender and release of control, where we're gripping and where we can let go more, particularly around identity. So this week is interesting because we're shifting into Libra season on the 23rd, on September 23rd from Virgo, which I always love this transition. I am a Libra, of course, and I love Libra energy, but it always feels like a bit of a release, like a sigh, at the end of a strong late summer. We had the Lionsgate, and August was quite intense, and then we moved into a really charged September, which brought the super moons and a really heavy retrograde period we've been moving through since in the end of July. And so Libra season is very welcomed, but this is an interesting Libra season because we are moving into eclipse season as well. And we have our first eclipse along this Libra Aries axis. Actually, we had one back in the late spring, but this is really kind of the official beginning because we're officially in the Libra Aries axis, nodal axis, which I talked a lot about in the last episode. And I would highly encourage you to go back and listen to that if you haven't, because there's so much information held within that episode about the nodes and about this Libra Aries axis that we're traveling along. And I really see eclipses as initiations. They really bring us into our depths where we are perhaps looking for and needing, without even being aware of it, change within our lives, a reroute, a reorientation, a redirection. And I'm going to do a whole eclipse episode because they're such interesting celestial events, and they really, really are so auspicious and have been held in delicate regard for centuries among many different cultures. And so eclipses are big, and we've been having some heavy hitters over the last few years as it's been traveling. We've had eclipses in Scorpio and Taurus, and those have been really deep, really intense, because Scorpio is so deep and so intense. The eclipses always have sort of a theme of death and rebirth within them, and then you add Scorpio into the mix and it's just supercharged. So I personally am okay leaving behind that nodal axis. It went over my ascendant, so I'm good. I'm real good. But I also am so appreciative of the medicine that it delivered too. And, I feel like I'm still integrating that learning, that medicine. And that's really what initiations do, is they bring us through a threshold crossing. And with the nodal axis of Aries and Libra being activated currently, Aries is such an initiator, and it can be quite reckless in how it moves through things, but Libra is much more balanced in the way it navigates the world. So as I spoke about in the last episode, we're really looking at the axis of self and others. Libra season always brings a focus on the other, because that's its role really in the zodiac, is to find balance between the self and others, to create harmony within this existence, to find the balance point, the axis point between ourself and other people, to form relationships, to be able to connect in healthy ways. So as we move out of this Venus retrograde, we're going to go straight into eclipse season. So there will certainly be a re-emphasis on the relational work we've been talking about in quite a few episodes, and I've been talking about for quite a few years, because I really started to feel this pick up in particular in 2020, really maybe 2019, but escalating in 2021, and seeing the role of Libra over the next few years and what she will be asking for us to refine within our relational dynamics, our relational framework. So as we start to build towards eclipse season, we will start to feel these themes magnify. I've been talking to so many people who are feeling this interesting push and pull energy where, there's so much being revealed. It's sort of slow. There's this inkling that there's something coming, or the next chapter is emerging, but there's not really a clear defined roadmap to get there, or the invitation isn't quite here yet. You're not feeling the transmission come through with enough clarity in order to act. And that's really what we're looking at, is this refined dance between responding to what's available without, rushing into things, and just allowing the presence to bring forth the medicine that is really needed in order to move through this with grace. So the retrogrades, and we still have many planets retrograde, are kind of tapering off as we move through the end of the year. Officially in January, I think we have all planets are direct. So as each planet goes direct, it will provide a revealing. And as I talked about with the Venus direct, it was so revealing for many of us. Even Mercury direct was super revealing. It felt like I felt like the lid sort of popped off a lot of on a lot of things that I've been sort of feeling and wondering about. And that Mercury direct definitely delivered some clarity and some mobility. And as each planet goes direct, it of course reveals, like I said. So October 14th is our first eclipse in Libra. It's a solar eclipse with a new moon in Libra. So this was the last new moon before that takes place that we had last week in Virgo. And it's a really, really big opportunity to start preparing, creating space in our lives, starting to really work with your nervous system. Libra is the nervous system of the zodiac. So it's a really incredible time to start slowing as we approach the autumn equinox. We're moving into a space of really shifting energies, shifting into more slowness, preparation, really tending to our physical forms, our bodies, asking what our bodies need in order to facilitate this threshold crossing into a new season. And another thing I like to talk about when we're talking about Libra is dancing and creating beauty out of the most, mundane aspects of life. Really dancing with this journey and allowing it to bring forth its beauty and its medicine and its messages, even in the most simple moments. And we've done a lot of clearing out through Virgo season. So I feel like with Libra season, it's much more refining. These eclipses will certainly be somewhat tumultuous in what they do and kind of how they bring forth or invite in change within our lives. But with it being in Libra, it's not as, jarring as sometimes the Scorpio or the Aries eclipses can be. So, and then at the end of October, we have an eclipse in Taurus as well. So a full moon in Taurus. So there's definitely some really interesting energy happening with Venus right now. Both Taurus and Libra are ruled by Venus. So these eclipses are Venusian, which lends me to think that relationships will be front and center, money as well. So just note that, and I'll be releasing an eclipse episode in the next few weeks, which will certainly do a deeper download and deep dive into eclipses, what they are, what we can, how we can start to prepare essentially, to just preparing for the unknown as we move closer to October 14th. But today I really want to focus on the idea of an initiation, because I talk about it a lot in my work, and it's something I love studying and I find fascinating, because I'm always looking for sort of hints or messages that come through around our evolution as humans and why we're here, and what is the difference between our lived experience here on this planet now and our ancestors 500, 600,000 years ago? How can we harvest the medicine from our ancestors as we move through this wildly transformative, ever-changing timeline that we find ourselves on? And I do love the work of Frances Weller, who studies rites of passage and initiation work in Indigenous cultures who are still connected to their rites of passage and still have the infrastructure within their culture in order to facilitate these rites and these vehicles for growth to their communities, which is something we're so lacking in our Western culture. And if you're still connected to your Indigenous culture or your roots in some ways, then maybe you've incorporated rites of passage or initiation work into your life, which is just so powerful and transformative. But initiations are essentially vehicles for change, and they activate something within us that creates the catalyst for our death and rebirth experience. So in order for it to be an initiation, there is first a separation from what is familiar, a disconnection, something that brings us out of our sort of tunnel or the pathway we've been on, and creates a sense of perhaps fear or anxiety that activates us into our depths. And we can even look at this as, a catalyst for change. So maybe it's a breakup, or it's a realization that dropped in, a type of awakening. Perhaps it's a move or a death of a loved one, but something that separates us out from our trajectory, the path we've been on, what we hold familiar. And it separates us from even those that we have known, to create a sort of vision quest for ourselves. And of course, when we're going through this, we might not be conscious that this is what's happening, but we start to feel alienated. We start to feel, perhaps fears around loss or abandonment come to the surface, because we start to feel things pull away, and this is intentional. We're being pulled out of our normal path, our normal relationships in some ways, in order to rebirth ourselves, to come back anew. And so the first separation phase is where we realize or identify that we are in fact going through the death and rebirth phase, and that it is essential to let go and to trust the process. And then we move into the liminal space, which is where we really are learning and sort of in between the death phase and the rebirth phase. So we're gathering information and data. And I feel like that's where many of us are currently. We are being initiated into new versions of ourselves in many small ways, but in very big, vast ways as well, in ways that are maybe hard for us to comprehend, that our psyche might not understand. And the more understanding we can bring to our initiations, the more we can create ceremony and ritual around them, and our psyches can identify where the beginning and end is, which is really important. Otherwise, we can get stuck in this liminal space, which is the in-between. And I do feel like many of us are in this liminal space where we're not quite sure what the next chapter looks like. We aren't quite sure who we will become on the other side of this giant initiation, but we're in it, we're here, we're present with it. It's really important in the liminal to let go, to acknowledge that we don't know everything, that we, to allow the ego to dissolve in some ways, and to admit that the ways in which we've been moving through life before perhaps won't work on the other side of this. The intention of an initiation is to create separation from who we were before and who we are becoming afterwards, so that our psyche can also identify that, it's a maturational phase, and that we don't have to act from that less matured, evolved state of our state of self, that we can evolve into this new version of self. And then on the other side of the liminal space, there's reintegration. So it's being witnessed in community by others that you are in fact different. And that's something that I really notice is lacking in our modern society, especially in Western culture, is this reintegration back into society after a big metamorphosis or a huge transition phase, and the liminal space. And I think many of us are kind of still stuck in the liminal. We haven't necessarily been rebirthed and entered the world anew, as a new identity, as a new person, as a more evolved version of self. And because I do think that COVID itself was such an initiation for many of us. It was certainly an ego death. There was this very large and long liminal space of not knowing and of learning and exploring and doing the depth work and excavating. And moving back into society has been quite confusing because we still aren't sure what happened, right? So I want to talk a little bit about COVID in another episode too. I don't want to spend too much time on it today, but I do believe that we are lacking a rite of passage around COVID, and we're getting pulled back into it without actually knowing what it is and what it means and how it really disintegrated many relationships and there were many ego deaths and perhaps lack of ego deaths that really needed to happen. And that's created a huge rupture, that's been lacking repair within our society. So this initiation, this big initiation we're all in, many of us, I'm assuming if you're listening to this podcast, you've felt these different feelings over the last few years, especially if not longer, of separation, exploration, perhaps a complete identity rebirth, the dissolving of one identity and not quite knowing or having the other identity formulated before you've entered back into society. So I think that, I've talked to a lot of people who are feeling their social anxiety much higher post-COVID and aren't quite sure who they are or how to identify themselves or how to explain the process that they've been through over the last few years. And if this is you, you're not alone. This is, I think, very common because there's a lack of understanding and there's a lack of rites of passage around what we've been through as a community, as a collective, and individually as well. And it's not just that, it's not just COVID as an initiation. It's also the many small initiations we go through frequently as we move through this golden age, this quantum leap in evolution, and the fact that we don't necessarily have to identify or create a box around who we are, but to acknowledge that we are in the liminal and we aren't sure. We're working it out and we're figuring it out and we're learning and gathering information and staying open to the potentials, the potential timelines and the potential identities. And, looking at initiations through the lens of, these astrological transits and the threshold crossings I see us moving through so frequently and so rapidly now, a large component of an initiation of a threshold crossing is facing our fears. We have, our subconscious works really hard to keep us in very familiar types of scenarios and patterns because it's quote unquote safe, right? And so much of what we're doing now is challenging that, realizing that where we've been, what's held us familiar or safe is not aligned with where our evolutionary path is headed. And so as we move through, this process of the light, more light entering the planet, what it does is it activates our fear. All of the change that we see, the uncertainty that's held within a threshold crossing, within an initiation, that's really where the magic is. The juicy medicine is held in the unknown within these initiations. So in the surrendering of the ego, the need to stay safe and familiar, and in the stepping into the unknown, that's where the real power and alchemy happens. And I do see so many of my clients and so many people around me that are getting pushed into the unknown without having any clue of where they're headed. And so something I love to work with people on is how to dance with fear. And fear really is an indicator that we are expanding, that that we're pushing up against our walls of familiarity and comfort, and we're being asked to evolve, to face those fears. And I think what we're, sort of conditioned to do is to avoid the fear, or to say, oh, wow, that's a fear. I'm going to, bypass it or move around it or avoid it without even actually knowing that's what we're doing. But it's actually not the fear that we're afraid of. It's how the fear makes us feel. It's the potential outcome and how we will feel with that potential outcome. It's not even oftentimes the outcome itself. And the more we push it away, the more we resist it, the effort and the energy that's required in order to resist our fears that we're being asked to integrate, it just creates more fear. It sort of magnifies what's already existing. So the medicine for that, the remedy for that, is to actually lean into the fear, to ask it questions. It's the same thing as when you hear in like a shamanic journey or psychedelic work, subconscious work, where something comes forward. It's maybe an archetype for the fear. It could be a big black wave, or it could be a scary monster. And instead of running from it, which is, kind of what we're hardwired to do because there is so much fear on the planet, and it's sort of what keeps the the systems that exist in power, the patriarchal or Piscean systems that have existed really feed on our fear. So as we evolve as a culture, as we evolve as a collective, we're being asked to own and integrate our fears in order to fully taste and embody our power. And so instead of running from that big wave or that monster or that fear timeline, perhaps your greatest fear is that you'll lose everyone you love, Lean into that feeling, lean into that fear. If your fear is abandonment, what does it actually look like to be abandoned? What would it feel like? Walk yourself through that process. And of course, tend to the nervous system, perhaps, have someone to co-regulate with through this process, have support because it can be really activating, especially if it's a core wound. So I love, really doing this within a container, within having a somatic or a trauma-informed practitioner on hand to do this work with you, to help you orient, but really leaning into that fear. Seeing it, looking it in the eyes, walking yourself through the process of it. What would it look like and feel like? And I can almost guarantee on the other side of that, you would still be okay, right? You would still receive what you needed to, the medicine. And then what that does is it allows you to integrate the fear rather than, continue to resist it or push it away. And because I work with people moving through transitions or liminal spaces, change, initiations, I always see the core wound surface, and it's only moving through and into the core wound where we really are able to access our full power. We can't access our full power, our full potential, our most embodied state dancing around our wounds or dancing around our fears. Personally, I've seen this surface around, navigating the inevitable loss of my dog Arlo, and because our nervous systems are so intertwined, and he has been my safe co-regulator for 13 years, I am facing one of my greatest fears. And I knew this the minute I got him. I was like, he is such a teacher. He is such a safe being. He is my soulmate, and the loss of him is going to crush me. And I knew that when he was a baby. And so I've been living with this fear for 13 years without, working through layers of it. I worked through layers of it in 2017, 2018. He's been such an incredible teacher for me, and he's really brought me into my codependency work, enmeshment, my relational framework, and, nearing the end of his life. Now I'm doing some of the big heavy lifting, getting into the layers around what does it look like to lose him? What does it actually feel like? How can I move and lean into that feeling so that I can process some of it now rather than pushing all of it to the end, to the inevitable event itself. And of course, I'm very lucky to have time and to know and to move through this sacred process of, processing his loss, his physical loss, and also, leaning into my own death and rebirth process within losing him, knowing I won't be the same on the other side of this loss, holding the presence with such gratitude and preciousness. And so I think when you're in an initiation, it is so, so powerful to dance with your fears, to sit with them, to look at them, to ask them questions, to get to the root of where they come from. And I promise you, at the bottom of that, they will not feel as scary as they do when you're pushing them far away. And with the North Node in Aries really anchoring an incredibly powerful identity rebirth in particular, initiating us all into a new chapter, asking for us all to lean into the death of what was, the death of harmony and peace and all the things that we, all the ways in which Libra seeks to avoid chaos. Aries is asking for it, and we need chaos in initiations. We need to to honor the surrendering of peace, in order to lean into the chaos, in order to lean into the fire, the flames of alchemy, and come through anew on the other side. So we will be guided through this initiation process at a deeper level, I think, over the next, year, especially as we move through this Libra and Aries axis, and especially with the eclipses. And we'll, have our fears challenged. Whatever our fears around stepping into our power will come to the surface, especially this fall and winter as we navigate eclipse season. So initiations are really a descent. It's really an encounter with death. And if we can provide some containment of our initiation, some awareness around what's happening and why we're here and what's being dismantled and how we can move through it with awareness, then it doesn't have to be an extended initiation. We don't have to sit and live within that liminal space, which can be quite confusing. So the quote I leave you with is a quote by Francis Weller, who I really love, and I really love his initiation work. He's a Jungian psychologist and has a wonderful lecture series and books on grief, initiation, the importance of depth work. And I think it really, this quote really helps perhaps reframe where we currently are with all the chaos and all the complexity and all the emotions that are coming forward, and to find peace, calm, harmony, and happiness within these times, which Libra is asking for us to harvest. That is our work, to be alive and to be a good host to whoever arrives at the door of our house. Happiness then becomes a reflection of our ability to hold complexity and contradiction, to stay fluid and accept whatever arises, even sorrow. Loss bonds us together in a potent alchemy, confirming the heart's intimacy with all things. Losing something or someone we love brings us into the shelter of our mutual grief. Grief and love are sisters, woven together from the beginning. Their kinship reminds us that there is no love that does not contain loss, and no loss that is not a reminder of the love we carry for what we once held close. Our broken hearts have the potential to open us to a wider sense of identity, one capable of seeing through the partitions that have segregated self from the world. Through grief, we're initiated into a more inclusive conversation between our singular lives and the soul of the world. This is just, one excerpt from his work, but I really, really love the part of being within initiation is the ability to harvest medicine and beauty from grief and from suffering and from loss and all the parts that are involved in a death process. So if you are navigating this space, I really do recommend Francis Weller's work. It's really incredible and beautiful. And if you're seeking a guide within your initiation, I am full for private mentorship this year. I might be opening a few spots in November or December. I'll keep you posted because I know that the holidays can bring forth a lot for people. It's a really powerful time. And I'm so honored to have a wait list for my mentorship. It's something that, indicates that I'm wanting to open up into more group work so that I can work with more people, and my work can be more accessible. So stay tuned for that, things to come. But I'm just so grateful for every single person who's listening to this. Thank you for being here, for your presence, for your dedication to your own depth work, your own initiations. If you are within an initiation, I see you. You are not alone. Feel free to send me a message on Instagram, shoot me an email if this episode resonated. If you're feeling like you need assistance in orienting, even just, having someone witness you can be really helpful as well. And last but not least, I wanted to talk about the card pull for today for the collective of Soul Archaeology for this podcast. And I pulled the octopus card from the Untamed Elemental deck, which I have been pulling from a lot and I love so much. And this is perfect. It's regeneration. As a complex master of disguise and charismatic contortionist, Octopus is ever-changing, highly resilient, and totally unlimited. She is an independent queen with 3 hearts, 9 brains, and an incredible talent for regeneration. She is a vessel of everlasting treasures that fuel her total recovery and dispel perceptions of terminality. As a living representation of the power of regeneration, Octopus bestows the auspicious news that, despite profound loss or wounds, life is dexterous. She supports the improbable truth that brokenness is not defeat. We can come back even stronger than before. Within the universe, there is an infinite supply of energy. Money is not spent, it is circulated. Love is not lost, it takes new forms. Opportunities aren't missed, they return in ways that more accurately reflect your truth. Call on Octopus's medicine when you need to be reminded that healing and regeneration are not only possible, they are the nature of life itself. When it's balanced, it's flexible, resilient, creative, regenerative, imbalanced, struck down, contracted, and brittle. To bring into balance, float or soak in water, anoint your body with precious oils. I love, love, love that card so much because I think it's perfect when we're talking about initiations, the death and rebirth, the fact that we can move in flow through these different cycles and that we can be present with what is, knowing that we are infinite beings with infinite potential to regenerate and to rebirth ourselves and to stay within balance, really. So let me know how this episode resonated. Please, if you don't mind, leave a 5-star review, rate the episode, leave a 5-star rating, review the episode if you don't mind, subscribe. All of these things help me so much as I start to grow this baby podcast into what I know it would like to be, which is, reaching more people and being a space of reflecting, mirroring, connection. So I hope you're all having a beautiful, beautiful week, and I will talk to you next week.